Okay, so I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who's a similar age to me, both Gen Xers, and we were talking about the things that schools used to be able to get away with, which today are just totally no-go zones at all. So we devised a list of 10 of the worst and most comical things that schools used to be able to do to school children in the 70s and 80s. Particularly the 80s. So we'll start off nice and easy. And anybody who's watching this who wasn't around in the 70s and 80s, even the 90s, these really may surprise you that schools were able to do this. And I don't like to use the snowflake generation, but having compiled this list, I definitely think we are made of sterner stuff. So the first one on my list is doing outside PE activities regardless of the weather. I remember growing up at high school and I remember us having to do rugby in absolutely freezing cold temperatures, t-shirts, shorts, and yeah, it was absolutely horrendous. It was sideways rain, it was hail, it was windy, it was absolutely disgusting weather. And we used to go and have to play rugby for an hour and a half in that, go and get a quick shower, and then get off to lessons for the rest of the day. It was abysmal. Cross-country running as well was another favourite that they like to chuck in during the winter months. Again, running down little country lanes and around the school and around playgrounds, and literally the teachers had no idea where we were. We just were set off and there's your finish line. We'll see you when you come back. We were running through housing estates and things. That was the route that we were given. The teachers were probably in the teacher's staff room having a cigarette and a drink or something, something to eat. We were out running in the cold. Anyway, number 9 on my list. This didn't affect my school whilst I was there. They'd abolished it by the time I started, but it was definitely a thing, and there was big signs up on the walls still when I was there in the early to mid 80s, and that was segregation of boys and girls within the school. Yes, you heard it. Boys and girls separated in all lessons, not allowed to come in contact with each other during the school day. Number 8 on my list, teachers smoking in the teachers' lounge area. Yes, they used to smoke in the teachers' lounge area. And if anybody's ever been into one of those rooms, you were kind of scared. There were teachers, they were laughing, they were joking, they were being rude to each other, they had cigarettes on the go. Odd occasion, I'm pretty sure I saw a couple of bottles of whiskey on the side as well. That was the teacher's lounge area. It was a no-go zone for students, but on the odd occasion where you did have to go in there to get a message to one of the teachers that some fights just broken out in the playground or something, it was a very, very scary place to go. Yeah, don't have fond memories of the school's teacher's lounge. Number 7 on my list, school outings on coaches. School outing on coaches without seatbelts. Now, coaches these days have seatbelts. It's a safety thing. We've had we've had accidents in the past with coaches rolling and people sadly passing away. Sadly, people dying from rolled coaches. But when we were kids, they didn't have a seatbelt. You're lucky if the driver had a seatbelt. Number 6, locked school gates on arrival. So at my school, your school started at, say, 8:45 in the morning. If you were not in the perimeter of the school by 8:45, those gates were locked and you were not coming in. You were sent off back home. Regardless of how far away you lived, you didn't make it into school by 8:45, those gates were locked. On the flip side, once you were in those gates, they were also locked, so there was no going out of those gates during the day until it was home time. Now, when I moved into senior school, our school had a separate building for the higher 3 years. That was in the middle of a town. So it was like 10 minutes walk up the road from the first 2 years. But members of the public walked through the school premises in the upper schools because it was all open planned. Not like schools these days, which are all perimetered off with pretty much barbed wire and gun turrets. Number 5. Favourite one of teachers, this one. Grabbing a student by the collar, neck, or arm. This was a favourite with some of our teachers, especially those that were in the PE department or the craft design technologies, so woodwork, metalwork. They seemed to be the ones that enjoyed the physical activity more than ever. And this was that if you were even just loitering around, minding your own business, not doing anything wrong, if a teacher thought you were, they would come, grab you, and throw you out the way, down the corridor, get to your class, or whatever else. And it was physical abuse. It was physical abuse. There was a story, and I don't know how true this is, but there was a story of a lad from a younger year that kind of tried to fight back against the woodwork teacher, and the woodwork teacher put the kid's head in a wood vice. The teacher actually left not long after that story came out, so I kind of suspect there might be an element of truth to it. How much? I'll never know. But that leads me on to number 4. If you weren't thrown around corridors for misbehaving or just minding your own business, you could be put on detention with 0 warning. Like, that's it, I've had enough, you're all on detention tonight, we're going to be here till 5 o'clock. That was a regular occurrence in my school, particularly in the first 2 years with our maths teacher. We had mixed sets, so the different abilities, and some decided it was a bit of a playground, so they used to cause trouble in the classroom. The rest of us then had to take the punishment as well, and I can remember my mum phoning the school many times complaining that I'd not got home for about 2 hours after I was due home because we'd been put on detention with no warning. Bear in mind, this is before we had mobile phones and being able to communicate with, home to let them know I'm going to be late. No, you're on detention. That's it. End of it. You're here for 2 hours every single night for most of my first and second year. I remember it vividly. Mr. Taylor, you bastard. Number 3 then. A favourite of some teachers, especially the really vindictive ones. Public humiliation. So if you decided, you needed to go to the toilet during class, the teacher would go, of course you can go to the toilet. Mind you don't piss yourself again. Don't want to wet your pants again. Or whatever came out of their mouth. And it was public humiliation. There were people, now that I realise that neurodiversity exists and autism and ADHD and everything else, that it's a real thing. There were people in my class, that myself included, that had these conditions, and we were victimised for bad spelling, being crap at maths, not being able to remember poems off by heart in English. It was not like we weren't trying, it's just we're unable to. Now at the age of 50, I understand it perfectly. But back then there was nothing, and I can't blame the teachers for this, because they didn't know either. But it was public humiliation that they loved. Okay, top 2 now. And both of these are linked together. And both of these really make me chuckle when I think of them. And when we're compiling this list, these were the big 2 things in my secondary school. Number 1, teachers throwing chalk at students. Yes, before we had whiteboards, we had chalkboards. And chalkboards came with chalk. If you misbehaved, that teacher would get that piece of chalk and they would launch it across the room with pinpoint accuracy, like skimming a stone across a lake. If you were unlucky enough to be causing a little disruption whilst they had the board duster in their hand, then that was coming your way. And I can remember like it was yesterday how many students were being hit by pieces of chalk going across the classroom and board rubbers hitting students, particularly when their back was turned when they were talking to the row behind them, and the board duster would hit them in the back of the head. Now, I do remember on one occasion that one of the students decided that he would start the game, where everybody dotted around the room just started to hum randomly, like and slowly it got louder and got louder and got louder. And when the teacher looked at you, you stopped and you go, wasn't me. But the whole class kind of got in on this eventually, so nobody was left behind. And I remember the teacher throwing the board rubber at who he thought had started it. And to be fair, he's probably right, knowing this person. But the student caught the board duster and absolutely pinpoint accuracy threw it straight back at the teacher and got him clean on the forehead. There was a gasp in the classroom. There was a little bit of an applause, I think, as he was being dragged out of the classroom by the teacher by the scruff of his neck, literally, feet just about touching the floor. But it was an everyday occurrence in certain classes. But that was growing up in the 80s. So that leads me on to the last one. Now, I'm lucky to say that this was stopped in my school the year before I started. Not that I was disruptive, but the fear of it, caning. Physical punishment with a wooden bamboo cane. Now that put fear of God into any student, that they potentially could be called to the headmaster's office and were physically disciplined with a cane. So for those of you too young to remember, what this meant was you went to your school headmaster's room, you were asked to bend over the table whilst they got a huge, great big, flexible wooden bamboo cane and lashed you. We don't do this to criminals. We don't do this to rapists. We don't do this to paedophiles. Maybe we should, but we don't. And yet, in the 80s and 70s, it was done to students. Horrendous to think that that's what we used to do. But it kind of kept us in line enough with just the thought that it could be introduced that we didn't go too far. But I do remember being called to the headmaster's office once. 2 of us were called there. 3 of us maybe, I can't remember now. But we were called to the headmaster's office. No idea why. We thought we'd done something wrong. We sat on the chairs in the office waiting for him to come in. On the back of the door were wooden canes with a hook on, just hanging there, going, you might be next. Anyway, it turns out we had actually done something really good and we were being rewarded for it. But just sitting in that office watching the canes on the wall really put the fear of God into me, because I'm like, yeah, I am not feeling this. So anyway, that was growing up in high school in the 80s in the UK. What are your memories of what we used to get away with, or the teachers used to get away with, more importantly, in the 80s? Leave a comment below, let me know, and I will see you in the next video. And don't forget, like and subscribe if you like this. It costs you nothing, but hey, it's helping me out grow the channel. So appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next video.